Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. How you all doing? I hope you all are doing great. Yes, your girl is back with another interesting video I know you are going to love. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting on the video titled Who Owns the West Philippine Sea? Is it the Philippines or the China? But before I proceed with this video, if you're watching me, you're new to my channel, you love my reaction videos, you want to see more from the Philippines, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you don't get to miss out each time I bring videos like this your doorstep. So without wasting much of your time, let's watch this video, and at the end of it, we are going to know who owns the West Philippine Sea. Okay?
A Philippine boat and Chinese ship have collided near a contested reef in the latest territorial dispute between the two countries in the South China Sea. The Philippines said China had harassed, blocked, and executed dangerous maneuvers in highly contested region in the West Philippine Sea. In a separate incident, the Philippines also condemned China's illegal and aggressive actions in the South China Sea on December 9, saying that China's Coast Guard had fired water cannon at a Philippine Fisheries Bureau vessel conducting a regular resupply mission. The South China Sea is at the center of a territorial dispute between China, the Philippines and other countries. Meanwhile, on December 10, China had targeted Philippine civilian supply vessels in the Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands, one of a flashpoint area between the two countries. One of two boats carrying provisions was rammed by a Chinese Coast Guard ship, the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea said in a statement. Manila accused the Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia of repeatedly firing water cannons at its resupply boats, causing serious engine damage to one, and deliberately ramming another. Philippine Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces Romeo Bronner said he was on board a vessel that was both sprayed with a water cannon and rammed. But the China Coast Guard accused the Philippine boats of deliberately colliding with the Chinese vessel after disregarding multiple stern warnings. U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines Mary Kay Carlson said in a post on the social media platform X that China's behavior violates international law and endangers lives and livelihoods. The U.S. stood by with the Philippines in support of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The incident comes ahead of December 10, when the Philippines plans to deploy a Christmas convoy of around 40 Philippine vessels to distribute gifts and other provisions to residents in Thidu Island, the Philippines' largest occupied island in the South China Sea, and to troops garrisoned on an aging warship in the Second Thomas Shoal. The Philippines Task Force said 3 Fisheries Bureau vessels were on a supply mission on Saturday to provide oil and groceries to more than 30 Filipino fishing vessels near the Scarborough Shoal when they came under fire from Chinese water cannons at least 8 times. It comes after the Philippines accused China of using war cannons to obstruct 3 of its vessels on few days ago in what it called illegal and aggressive actions. Beijing said it had used what it called control measures on ships that had intruded into its waters. To prevent the distribution of humanitarian support is not only illegal but also inhumane, the task force said, adding that China deployed boats to drive away Filipino fishing vessels awaiting supply, and to illegally install a floating barrier. Chinese maritime militia vessels were also reported to have engaged in dangerous maneuvers and deployed a long-range acoustic device that resulted in temporary discomfort and incapacitation to some Filipino crew, the task force said. The Philippines has filed diplomatic protests and has summoned China's ambassador over its aggressive actions in the South China Sea, which the Philippines Foreign Ministry officials said were a threat to peace, good order and security. Earlier this week, the Philippines accused China of swarming a reef off its coast after more than 135 military boats were spotted in the South China Sea. The United Nations on the Law of the Sea recognizes the Philippines' right to control and develop the disputed area based on the 2016 South China Sea arbitration. Based on international law, the Philippines has legal rights in the disputed area. However, the reality is that China already controls almost all the facts on the ground and now has a real and credible foothold in the South China Sea. The dispute over the South China Sea has been thrust back into the spotlight amid increasing tension between the Philippines and China in the disputed waters. For years, China has anchored its South China Sea claims on the 9-dash line, under which it lays claim to almost 90% of the disputed waters as far south as the coasts of Malaysia, Borneo and Brunei. Images published by China showed the imaginary line almost hugging the shores of neighboring countries. Using the controversial line, Beijing has been ramping up activities in the South China Sea, starting with the Paracel Islands in the 1970s and 1980s, the Spratly Islands in the 1990s, and the Scarborough Shoal in the early 2000s. The changing dash lines are the basis of China's claim to sovereignty over 90% of the South China Sea. This claim is based on the U-shaped 11-9 dash line etched on a map in the 1940s by a Chinese geographer, then 9 dashed lines in 1952, and currently, the 10 dash line in mid-2023. Meanwhile, the Philippines backed its historical claims from the 17th century map, where the Scarborough Shoal first appeared on maps of Philippine waters in the 1750s. On the night of September 12, 1748, the British East India Company ship Scarborough struck the now famous reef of the same name while on its way from England to China. As a result, the name Scarborough Shoal first appeared on maps of Philippine waters by English cartographers in the 1750s, according to research by a member of the Philippine Map Collectors Society. It also appears in the Murillo Velarde map in his 1749 book under the name Panicot or Scarborough Shoal. Both terms refer to Bajo de Masinloc. Going back to the 17th century, the hydrographical and chorographical chart of the Philippine Islands was one of the first versions of the Philippines map. This magnificent map of the Philippine archipelago, drawn by the Jesuit father Pedro Murillo Velarde and published in Manila in 1734, is the first and most important scientific map of the Philippines. Currently, the Philippines based its claims on the legal victory on the 12th of July 2016, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The arbitral tribunal in the South China Sea arbitration between the Republic of the Philippines versus the People's Republic of China, which issued a unanimous award in the disputed waters in the South China Sea largely favorable to the Philippines, which was rejected by China. For long, China has argued that its claim over the South China Sea is historical in nature. Beijing relies on documentary and archaeological evidence, indications of Chinese activity in the SCS spanning thousands of years, to support China's sovereignty claims. At first glance, this proffered evidence may appear to be sufficient proof of China's claims of sovereignty, especially when China's sovereignty is assumed, and evidence is sought to support these claims. However, this historical rights argument has been challenged on several fronts. First, there is scant proof that China has controlled the South China Sea after the mid-17th century. Indeed, after a burst of seafaring exploration during the Ming Dynasty between 1368 to 1644, China's emperors largely shut their empire off from the seas. As a consequence, there is scarce cartographic proof of China's rights over the South China Sea. Most of the land features and islands within the South China Sea are just microscopic bits of earth with little history behind them and basically no civilians living on them. In addition, the archaeologists who discovered archaeological evidence in the SCS are Chinese and in some cases are sponsored by Beijing, potentially biasing them to conclude that the evidence proves China's ownership of the islands and disregard other potential sources of the evidence such as shipwrecks, temporary stops by Chinese ships, or even planting of the evidence by interested individuals or groups. In referencing China's historic claims, Beijing refers to the Chinese people and not to any particular government or country. These statements show that Beijing views China as a cultural group of people, rather than as a particular nation-state or government. With this viewpoint, China looks at the evidence of the activity of Chinese people in the SCS and the evidence of Chinese claims of sovereignty over the SCS as inextricably intertwined. The fact that the vast area of the South China Sea has been a common fishing ground for centuries not only for the Chinese but also for people living in modern states of the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei and Indonesia. Historical records may not favor China in the continuing debate on the control of the South China Sea, through which as much as $5.3 trillion in global trade passes annually. To further disprove China's claim of historical rights, several ancient Chinese maps, dating as far back as 900 years ago, to the Song and Tang dynasties. All the maps showed that China's southernmost territory was the island of Hainan. Additionally, the 1947 Constitution of the Republic of China also identified Hainan as the country's southernmost part, raising questions over what would later emerge as the 9-line claim. In modern history, China backed its sovereignty claim and related rights over this territory in accordance with the 1943 Cairo Declaration and the 1945 Potsdam Proclamation. After World War II, Japan returned to China the Chinese territories it had occupied, including Taiwan and the Penghu Islands, the Chisha Islands, and the Nansha Islands. However, the 2016 Arbitral Tribunal under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea invalidated China's historical claims over the disputed waters of the South China Sea. The tribunal dealt with the question of whether China's claims to historic rights within the 9-line, now 10-line were in conformity with UNCLOS. It was first observed that this area, in which China claimed rights, formed in the long historical course, to living and non-living resources like fisheries and petroleum resources, partially overlaps with areas that would otherwise comprise the exclusive economic zone or the continental shelf of the Philippines. In the view of the tribunal, UNCLOS establishes a comprehensive maritime zones regime and allocates rights in these areas to the coastal state and other states. In the areas of the EEZ and the continental shelf, the coastal state enjoys exclusive sovereign rights to the exploitation of living and non-living natural resources. Concerning the rights of other states in these areas, the tribunal found that UNCLOS does not permit the preservation of the historic rights of any state within the EEZ or the continental shelf of another state. Therefore, after the entry into force of UNCLOS, the historic rights that might have existed for China within the 9-line in areas that would otherwise include the EEZ or the CS of the Philippines were superseded by the maritime zones regime created by UNCLOS. That means the pre-existing historic rights no longer exist as they are not compatible with UNCLOS. Accordingly, the tribunal concluded that China's claims were contrary to UNCLOS and exceeded the geographic limits imposed by it. The award addresses three main substantive issues. First, the so-called 9-line and China's claim to historic rights in the South China Sea. Second, the status of certain maritime features in the South China Sea. And third, the legality of Chinese activities in the South China Sea. Because of jurisdictional limits, however, the arbitral tribunal did not deal with matters related to territorial sovereignty over the disputed maritime features between the parties. That means that the tribunal did not decide who owned the maritime features located in the South China Sea, such as the Spratly Islands, that are claimed by both China and the Philippines or any other coastal state in the region. Similarly, the tribunal did not delimit any maritime boundaries between the Philippines and China in the South China Sea. The tribunal also ruled on the legality of the activities of Chinese officials and Chinese vessels in the areas of the South China Sea located within the Philippines' EEZ and continental shelf. It concluded that China breached the provisions of UNCLOS, in particular by temporarily prohibiting fishing in areas of the South China Sea falling within the Philippines' EEZ. Failing to prevent Chinese vessels from fishing in the Philippines' EEZ at Mischief Reef and Second Thomas Shoal, and preventing Filipino fishermen from engaging in traditional fishing at Scarborough Shoal. Regarding China's construction of artificial islands, installations, and structures at Mischief Reef, an LTE that is part of the Philippines' EEZ and continental shelf, without the authorization of the Philippines, the tribunal also found China to have violated UNCLOS. Furthermore, the tribunal held that China's land reclamation and construction of artificial islands, installations, and structures in the Spratly Islands caused severe, irreparable harm to the coral reef ecosystem. The Philippines welcomed the award, which vindicated most of its claims, and stated that it remained open to negotiate with China. Conversely, China rejected the decision as illegal, null, and void and therefore without any binding effect on itself. Other countries, including the United States, Vietnam, Australia, and Japan, backed the Philippines and called on China to respect the tribunal's decision. On the other hand, Cambodia supported China's non-acceptance of the award. The Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, and India, all of which have territorial disputes with China, have objected to the 2023 version of the country's standard map, released on the 28th of August by the Chinese Ministry of Natural Resources. The map includes a U-shaped line that reaffirms Beijing's claims to sovereignty over almost all of the South China Sea, including the West Philippine Sea, a resource-rich and strategically important region through which trillions of dollars in trade flows each year. The line extends into the exclusive economic zones of a number of countries. It also includes the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh and the Aksai Chin, in the Himalayan border, which China controls but India also claims, and the Russian territory of Bolshoy-Ussuriysky Island.
Alright guys, let me know what you think about this video in the comment section, okay? See you all on my next one. Bye!